Hello, everyone, and welcome to our series of webinars entitled AI Talks at ETUI. My name is Aida, Ponce del Castillo, and I am your host. And today we have a very special guest, Professor Antonio Casilli. His research focuses on computer-mediated communication, labor, and also fundamental rights. Antonio, he is a professor of sociology at the Telecom Paris. It's the School of Telecommunication Engineering of the Polytechnic Institute of Paris. He is also associate researcher at the School for Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences. He is a faculty fellow at the Nexus Center for Internet and Society of the Polytechnic University of Turin. He has been a regular commentator at La Grande Table and active commentator in the French radio, Place de l'Étoile on France Culture. So thank you very much, Antonio, for being with us. This is
Thank you, Aida. What a great introduction.
Thank you. And it's really brilliant to have such a star like you. And today we have a very special topic on ethics. Starting point is ethical AI. And I'm a lawyer myself, but I was also trained in bioethics. And in bioethics, we address the ethical implications of the applications of science and new technology in humans and in society. We do so having in mind the various ethical perspectives and taking different schools of ethics, which vary in scholarship, in framework. Today with AI, I am a bit puzzled because ethics is being used quite widely and in very different ways. So what is happening with ethics and AI? Just tell us a bit about this thing, Antonio.
Well, Aida, there's a lot of confusion. Let's be clear and frank. The ethical issues and concerns that have been explored in bioethics or medical research in the past have been entirely wiped away, and the ethical AI field as a field of knowledge is quite complicated, which is an understatement to say that it is a mess. I will show you a couple of slides just to give you an idea of how many topics are on the table and the jury's out, and some topics are more, more research than others. First of all, we have to take into account the fact that artificial intelligence as a field is already 70 years old, which is a lot. And the surprising remark that one might do is that the ethical guidelines for AI do not surface before 2010, 2015. It is actually in 2015 that it becomes mainstream to talk about ethical AI after the publication of an influential open letter called Research Priorities for Robust and Beneficial Artificial Intelligence, which was an interesting document signed by great scientists and industrialists such as Elon Musk. And the great questions were asked, questions about what about the ethics of superintelligence, or an artificial intelligence which could outperform humans, or what is the ethical aspects of what are the ethical aspects of autonomous weapon systems or self-driving cars. Now, of course, these are interesting questions, but to be frank, this is not the main topic that is addressed when we talk about ethical AI. Ethical AI has been the object of at least 100 guidelines and documents and manifestos published in the last 10 years. Actually, my colleague Anna Joubin and her collaborators came up with a literature review. Actually, it is a meta-analysis of 94 of those ethical guidelines, and they discovered that despite the fact that these guidelines published and produced by both corporations, but also NGOs, but also government bodies or supranational government bodies, all these guidelines though divergent, converge around 5 main domains, meaning that they usually talk about either transparency, which can mean lots of things. Can mean, for instance, how can we make this artificial intelligence system transparent in terms of being explainable, or being accountable for what they do and how they do it, which is complicated per se, but especially complicated when AI is predicated on technologies such as deep learning, because deep learning is, by definition, a very opaque way of functioning for an AI. Then, of course, there's the topic of justice and fairness. This has been brought to the forefront of the public debate after a series of scandals or sensational news about face recognition AI that were discriminating people based on the color of their skin. Of course, this is a matter of bias. This is a matter of fairness, but justice can mean also other things when it comes to ethical AI. It can also mean, for instance, that these AI systems do not have to produce harm on other persons. And then this is also connected to known malfeasance, which means that usually these AI have to be designed for the greater good, let's say, like Google used to do a few years ago, when its motto used to be "Don't do evil," and then eventually they dropped it. An AI that doesn't do evil is all good and dandy, but how do we do it, and what do we mean by evil? Of course, the one who defines good and evil is not only can be a corporate actor, can be a government, but becomes an ethical actor, an ethical agent. Then there's the topic of legal responsibility. This has been discussed for a number of years. Actually, this pre-exists AI. To be fair, when we talk about, for instance, self-driving cars, there's a lot of legal responsibility and liability. Who is liable if a self-driving car kills, like it happened in 2018, a person in a car accident, in a street accident? It is a complicated topic. For instance, for those of you who remember what happened in 2018, when an Uber self-driving car killed a passerby in Tempe, Arizona. What happened was basically that Uber was not considered criminally liable, nor the engineers who designed the car, not clearly the victim, nor the city of Tempe in Arizona, where the accident happened. The only person who is, as of now, still embroiled in a very complicated legal procedure is the non-driver of the car, because the car was supposed to be self-driving, and instead of that, there was somebody who was actually a backup driver. Anyways, other topics concern privacy, and there's a lot to be said about this, so much that I simply consider that this would deserve a presentation in itself and a talk on itself, but privacy mainly concerns the actual possibility of an AI not only to record data, but also to process them of course, in a way that is incomparably bigger and more powerful when compared to the past, but also sometimes surprising, because AI solutions as of now are based on machine learning, and machine learning is supposed to come up with patterns that are not initially envisioned by the persons who designed the system. So in some cases, for instance, a face recognition or an eye scan technology can come up with surprising solutions in terms of machine learning. Now, of course, this cannot be all. It's a lot, clearly. again, these guidelines are largely divergent, but there are some remarkable absences, values that are not mentioned at all, or very little. For instance, the value of sustainability. There's little or no reference to, for instance, environmental sustainability, or trust in AI, or autonomy of the person who is the user of AI, or solidarity among users of AI. And more significantly, there is no links in these guidelines and manifestos between the principles that are enunciated and actionable requirement. Usually, and this is also to an extent the case with the AI, the European AI directive that is now been discussed in media and elsewhere, of course. The requirements in terms of actionable ethical AI are left to, well, basically to companies and governments and organizations, but there are no stringent requirements in this AI. And the most important part that has been highlighted not by me, but luckily and better by my colleague Meredith Whittaker, that published this article a few years ago, The Steep Cost of Capture. This article is actually shows to what extent these ethical AI guidelines are informed, are shaped by corporate interests and industrial interests. They are aligned with industrial interests, and so aligned and to an extent such that whenever there is an actually critical approach to ethical AI, usually this critical approach is diffused, and corporations and industries tend to fund and to support the weakest critics. So basically, this is one way of saying that there is so much ethical AI because there is so little criticism of AI in the ethical AI. Of course, it is a very extreme stance, the one presented here by Meredith Whittaker. But if we look at some indicators, such as the number of ethical AI papers that are sponsored or co-authored by persons working for a big tech corporation, well, it becomes pretty clear that they have their hands in this. They want to be, meaning the big five. Well, the big five are always considered like, the absolute evil, but the big five being the GAFAM, as we say in France: Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. But we do have some pretty evil corporations over here in Europe too, and of course in Russia, China, and in India. So again, there is definitely an interest by these industrial actors to be in the field of ethical AI. Let's just look at the number of authors having corporate ties that have been publishing ethical AI papers in big venues, big conferences in computer science, such as NeurIPS. The number of these authors with corporate ties has skyrocketed, has doubled pretty much between 2008 and 2018. It was 43% then, it is 75% now. Well, it's even more, but clearly this percentage is not up to date. And more importantly, if we look at who are these corporations that they want to have a say in the ethical AI field, well, we discovered that Alphabet, meaning Google, and Microsoft are increasingly present. Their presence has been multiplied fivefold over the last decade. And well, this is already a pretty strange and gloomy and confused situation. And we probably have to come up with some new ways of addressing the topic of the ethics of AI in order to come out to exfiltrate ourselves from this mess.
Thank you, Antonio. It's really very confusing to have all these types of approaches that in one way provide a narrative that is not really open to a critical approach. And on the other side, they are also putting aside critical assessments that coming from a more academic or more neutral, less biased approaches. So, so then how do you see ethics? So I think that ethics needs in AI systems need to be taken into account in the whole life cycle of the system, from the design, development, use, of course, with humans. What is your view on that?
Well, first of all, my view, let me just, follow on what you just said about the distinction between an ethics that is done by persons with corporate ties and the ethics done by independent researchers in the academia. Academia is not always independent, let's be clear. There are some, some people who have clear conflicts of interest and ties that are extremely problematic, especially with sectors that use heavily AI technology. I'm thinking about the weapon systems, for instance, and in general, weapon producers. And again, we have some examples here in Europe, and especially here in France, where I'm based, that are that should probably have a long look at themselves, and also some academics that have been working with them. But this is also one way of saying that I personally do not consider the situation so desperate we have to give up on the ethics of AI. The ethics of AI, it is important, and it is important because it is so visible and it is such a widespread concern that, to an extent, is a very good chance to leverage this demand for the ethics of AI to come up with some specific new approaches. First of all, let me just show you this slide, which I almost forgot. If we look at who produces ethical AI codes, there is a striking difference between northern countries and countries of the global south. Of course, I mean, in this image that you see, there is we see some limitations of the data that were collected by Anna Jobin and her colleagues. The fact that, for instance, they did not take into account guidelines written in Chinese, and there are some pretty remarkable examples of documents of ethical AI produced in the last few years. So we should probably add China to those, but we see some remarkable absence countries like practically all of Africa and all of South America and Latin America in general. And this might undermine pluralism and cultural awareness, and also might probably put us in a situation where we have to escape the situation by adopting a new approach, which I name the end-to-end ethical approach, ethical AI approach. End-to-end, if you allow me, is just a metaphor that has been borrowed by me and my colleagues who've been working on this topic, on this notion, has been, borrowed by some fields of computer science, such as cryptography, that insist on the fact that we have to encrypt information end to end, from the beginning to the end. And the same thing can be said about the ethical AI. AI must be turned into something ethical, into an ethical endeavor from end to end. But what are the ends of AI? Well, I use the topics, the notions and the tools of my own trade. I am an economist by training, and I am a sociologist by choice and by profession. And so I consider AI as a process of production of AI solutions. In some cases, these are really physical solutions. We have some technologies in our pocket, like our smartphone, that is, heavy on AI. Is it ethical? We don't know, because so much of the ethical AI philosophy, or in general, the treatment and analysis of the ethics of AI focuses on the deployment. of AI, meaning that we take into account that AI already exists. We already have the smartphone in our pocket, or the tablet, or the face recognition system already deployed, and we only have to deal with the usability or how people will react to this. So it's a matter of acceptability to an extent. But we forget about the other end being the production phase. And we have to take these two into account, because if we take these two phases into account, we can probably see things that were impossible to see if we only focus on the deployment. And this is something that has to do with the work that I've been doing in the last 5 years with my colleagues at my research team, which is called DeepLab. DeepLab stands for Digital Platform Labor. We started by, looking at platform workers like riders or taxi drivers, but also, freelancers, but also people who do data annotation. And we discovered there is an enormous market especially for the data annotation for AI. And the result of this research, or the first part of this research, is this actual figure that describes the process of production of AI from the standpoint of the data production, of the data labor, of the work that is necessary to produce and annotate the data that make AI possible. And basically, we have three phases in this production of AI. Three phases that really need a lot of human intervention. The first one is data generation. Somebody has to create those data. Sometimes this data are produced by us, meaning you and me, Aida, or anybody else who is using a device or is a user on a platform. We produce data every day, but this data are raw, are rough. They need to be refined, to be annotated. And this is where usually some workers of a specific kind, sometimes they're called micro workers, sometimes they're called crowd workers, are hired or simply recruited to annotate this data, to make it suitable to be used by the AI. And then, of course, once the AI is ready and the model is done and the solution is deployed and it's probably already on the market, well, we need to verify. We need to make sure that the AI is doing exactly what it promises to do. If my AI promises to recognize my face and to differentiate my face from the face of everybody else, we have to, make sure that the AI does what it does, what it promises at least. And then finally, there is a third part, which is interesting, which is called AI impersonation, which means in some cases, AI imitation. Some people in some cases have a specific task to imitate a function in AI. Let me give you three quick examples just to show how pervasive the human labor is in the production of AI. The first phase, as I told you, is AI preparation. AI preparation is something that we hear a lot of in the press, for instance, in the media, when we hear people saying that, I don't know, an algorithm has been trained in a certain way. What does it mean? It means that this algorithm or this AI has been shown a certain amount of examples of the things it has to do in order to recognize some entities. Let me give you an example. This is actually the first person that we interviewed back in 2017 in France. A person who was a micro worker, was hired. Well, was not hired. She was paid by piece. She was paid by click. She was not an employee of a platform. And on this platform, what she did was basically look at pictures of salad and draw a box around all the tomatoes, not the olives, not the salad, not the mozzarella, only the tomato. And what the quote that she gave us was fantastic, because it represents the alienation of these people. Because she said, they give us a picture of a plate and say, draw a square around a tomato. We don't know why. Everyone knows what a tomato is, I hope. Actually, what she was doing was she was prepared, she was training a dietary recommendation application, you know, like an app that you have on your smartphone. You take a picture of the thing you want to eat, and it computes automatically the number of calories, or if it's right for you. So this is preparation. But one might say, okay, yes, once we have prepared all the AI in the world, we can get rid of those workers, right? Well, not exactly. Well, because actually, well, AI preparation, which has a specific, you know, specific geography, in this case, this kind of tomato annotator was somebody who was hired in France, working for French, for a French company. It gets more complicated if we look at the second phase, the phase of verification of AI. Verification of AI is, again, as I was telling you, when we have already a solution that is probably on the market already, like, for instance, in this case, it was somebody who was working to verify if a vocal assistant, like the one that you have in your smartphone, and you say a certain name of a certain brand, and this AI does something for you. I don't know, calls your, I don't know, somebody on the phone, or sends a picture, and so on and so on. But in order to do this, the AI has to understand what you say. And sometimes, you know, it is difficult because there's some, you know, background noise, or like in my case, you have an accent, and the accent is quite difficult for the AI to detect. So AI producers have to actually recruit people who listen to the audio recording and check if the AI has transcribed correctly what the person has said, what the user has said. So again, this was a young woman interviewed by us in 2019, and she said, I listened to the audio recording. This were, you know, bits of 3 to 5 seconds. Then a text appeared on the screen, like the one that you see here, showing what the AI understood and transcribed. My job was to check that it was accurate. If it wasn't, I had to correct the transcription. And she was paid very little, a few cents for each transcription, and she had to work at a very, you know, heavy pace, like 120 transcriptions per hour, which is impossible because, of course, there's not enough seconds in an hour. So let me show you how complicated it becomes when it comes to see who pays whom to produce the data that are necessary for this. Yeah, because we have actually the company who produces the artificial intelligence. It was a US-based company, I won't say which one, that produced this vocal assistant. This company goes to a Chinese platform and says to the Chinese platform, I need 100,000, for instance, micro workers who annotate and verify the data of my AI. The Chinese platform goes to a Japanese platform to recruit the micro workers. The Japanese platform goes to a Spanish company that recruits somebody in France. And this person eventually produces the data by verifying that the AI is doing what it's supposed to do, and sends all the data back to the US. This is le tour du monde, as the French would say. It's a trip around the world in less than 80 days, definitely, because it has been done pretty in real time. And this is the final part, the final type of task that I want to highlight. There is a lot of AI impersonation in the artificial intelligence systems that are deployed today. Let me give you this example that has to do with the very recent fieldwork that I performed with my colleagues, Maxime Cornet and Clément Ledudec, who are 2 PhD students of mine. And we went together to Madagascar. Why? Well, because we were studying this very strange artificial intelligence that is deployed here in Europe. The artificial intelligence is an intelligent camera that is deployed in supermarkets. If somebody is stealing something, imagine, for instance, a chocolate bar, the intelligent camera, the smart camera, is supposed to have such a powerful algorithm that is capable not only of detecting somebody stealing something, but also to differentiate between somebody putting, his own telephone in his pocket or a chocolate bar. So it's quite powerful and extremely interesting. Let me show you the algorithm, the artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence is 126 persons in a house in the northern neighborhood of Tananarivo, which is the capital of Madagascar. And these people were working, they were doing the AI, and they've been doing this for years. The AI never existed. It's actually just people paid very little. They are paid something around 100 euros, the equivalent to 100 euros per month, which of course for Madagascar, well, it's not a good salary, but it's a salary for somebody, somebody in a kind of middle class, still in a very precarious situation. And, let's look at what they say. What we do with the team is we monitor the shops remotely in France. We do remote monitoring of these shops to check that there are no thefts. We have undergone a long training to master this task. For me, it's like watching over, like being a guard or a remote security agent to avoid all kinds of thefts that can happen in a shop. So again, they are clearly aware of the fact that they are doing live surveillance, live monitoring, but they call it AI, meaning not them, not the workers, the company. And let's look at finally this strange flow of data and of work between companies. So the main company, the company produces the intelligent camera, supposedly, is based in Europe. The workers are in Madagascar, as we saw. So basically, the images are recorded in supermarkets in Europe and sent to Madagascar, and people in Madagascar in real time annotate the image and sometimes, say, oh, there is a theft, and send a message in real time to a security guard in the supermarket. And it goes on for years and years and years, and it never finishes, because this is mainly one way of saying that if we look at AI, we have to think in terms of global supply chain. And if we think in terms of global supply chain, our own ethical perspective changes, I think.
Fantastic, the global supply chain. And we know that our audience is global as well. And this will speak to audiences from Taiwan, from the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. What you just said and the great work that you have done on mapping the flow of artificial intelligence is fantastic, because it also shows that the common mantra that circulates around that the algorithm is the boss it's not really true. There is always someone behind an algorithm, and that someone has specific face, and we have seen some of them, and it's quite astonishing. But this flow, geographical trip around the world and back has repercussions and starting points and endpoints everywhere. It's a global supply chain. So what's the ethical AI global supply chain, Antonio?
Well, this is of course the crux of the matter. It's a complicated part that we have to address. First of all, let me say that there's some very interesting research that has been done by my colleagues, Mark Graham or Billy LeDonverta in Oxford in the past few years, and they've been done an excellent job in mapping places in some speaking countries, English-speaking countries in Africa and in South Asia. What we do basically with my team is look at the rest of the world. What is left? Well, there are two big continents that need to be addressed, especially Africa and South America, because, of course, in terms of global South, they also are the continents where previous industries that were specialized in outsourcing in other sectors like the textile or call centers this is where these call centers were located for some specific linguistic zones of the world. And this is interesting. So if we look at what we know about the supply chains, let's look at the countries that produce AI. And remember the map that I showed at the beginning. The country that produce and market AI solutions are in the north of the world, and these are also the countries who produce the ethical AI guidelines. So basically, these ethical AI guidelines are a way for them to show that they are ethical. But let's look at where the data and the workers come from. Again, this is the first part is this flow that goes from the Philippines to India and then to North America. This is what my colleagues at Oxford studied back in 2013 already. And this is what we know. But we also know some new things. For instance, Africa is a very complicated continent. There is one part of Africa that goes from Madagascar to Senegal and finally to France that basically nourishes, let's say, feeds the AI that speak French, to be clear. And then, of course, there is also some countries that are emerging countries in AI, like Egypt, where I personally interviewed people who were doing face recognition for China. So the data that are produced by micro workers in Egypt go through the Gulf countries to China to produce their own AIs. And then, of course, there is South America, which is an extremely interesting and exciting place. Of course, South America is extremely diverse. You have giants like Brazil, you have powerhouses in terms of digital economy like Chile. And you have, of course, financial countries and so on. But you also have countries like Venezuela, and to a lesser extent, Colombia, who have their own economic and in some cases also political problems, and have been having this problem for years now. And these countries are the big hubs where you find the micro workers who produce most of the data as of today. And these are usually the persons who are paid less. So in terms of working conditions, in terms of remuneration, in terms of actually the way they work, these are really the exploited part of the world. And there is also China, of course, that has a big internal market. A lot of the Chinese AI solutions are trained and the data are produced by Chinese companies or platforms. But then there is a big question mark that has to do with Russia. And for a number of years, we knew nothing. We barely knew that there are some micro-working companies and platforms in Russia. But as of recent, also, let's say, because of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, we are starting to see that actually AI produced and marketed in Russia are trained by the same people in Africa and in South America, especially Venezuela. Again, this is what we can see from our point of view, and given the countries that we've been to, that are producing AI for this for Russia, basically. And in some cases, the applications are extremely problematic, especially when it comes, for instance, to weapon systems or ballistic systems that sometimes are trained by people in Africa who do not know exactly what they are doing and for whom, but the effects are visible.
Antonio, these new insights of your research, which I understand the new ones are coming from your fieldwork in Madagascar recently, and insights from the production of AI in Russia are absolutely fantastic. And thank you for sharing that with us. Are we talking about a new colonialism?
This is a long conversation to be had. I started working on the idea of colonialism. Well, actually, I talk about coloniality, which is not only a different term, not only a fancy term, but it's a way of saying that this is not colonialism as we used to know it in the 17th or 19th century. This is a new way of building global workers through platforms. But of course, I mean, it kind of reproduces some typical, let's say, imbalances between North and South, and this is reminiscent of colonialism. But there is also another thing that I wanted to point before we go, is that I want to talk about also about the environmental impact of AI, and allow me for this little slight provocation. This is actually a very, it's actually let's say a paraphrase of a famous sentence, famous slogan by the Brazilian union leader Chico Mendes. Chico Mendes in the 1980s used to say that environmentalism without class struggle is just gardening. And I like this, and I like this idea, and I want to say that ethical AI without environmentalism is just a debate club for rich assholes. And to be frank, I'm guilty, because sometimes I talk about well, corporate actors about ethical AI, and I try to, you know, talk some sense into them, and it's complicated because they consider it that, like, you know, like an extracurricular activity, but it is not extracurricular at all. It has to do with what we do with our planet, because AI, despite the fact that it is presented or used to be presented as a green technology, has a very heavy carbon footprint. First of all, it produces a lot of waste, not only in terms of the way these machine learning models are produced, but also how the devices that you know carry around the machine learning solutions are produced. There is a footprint and an impact on the environment in terms of waste, in terms of plastic, and especially, and this is another part of our research, in terms of the extractions of some minerals that are strategic to these industries. The images that you see are, the first one is when I was in 2018 in Bolivia. There is a big, probably the biggest salar. Salar is a salt lake, basically, which is very important to produce lithium. And lithium is, of course, very important to, for our batteries, for the batteries of our tablets or cars, or whatever, scooters, and so on and so on. The other one, the other image that you see there is actually a salar I'm planning to visit in January 2013, when I will be doing field work in Chile. And there is another big salar, a big producer of lithium, which is in Atacama, in the north of Chile. And it is important because, I mean, of course, these are important resources for those countries, for the economy of the countries, but they are also having an impact in terms of, requiring a lot of water, for instance, to produce this lithium, and also in terms of the working conditions of the workers. The last image that you see in the bottom is actually something that happened in Madagascar, and I had, let's say, the chance to talk with people who own this big mine in Ambatuvi. Ambatuvi is some 90 kilometers from the capital of Madagascar, and this is an open pit where cobalt and nickel are produced. And cobalt and nickel are then extremely important for both for batteries and for microprocessors. So we are, via this extraction, disrupting economies, creating conflicts over land and water. And of course, this demands a lot of labor. And the important part, and this is the most recent part of our research, which is still ongoing actually, has to do with mapping the places where these minerals are extracted. And no surprise, they are situated along the same lines where data flow, with some remarkable exceptions. I mean, Canada is a big mineral extraction country, but it's hardly a place where, you know, of the global south. And China and Australia too are big in production of rare earth or tin, and these are extremely important. So again, this is one way of saying that we have to, again, if we look at the ethical AI from end to end, we have to take into account the human environments and work, the human work that is necessary, but also the ethical environments. Otherwise, we lose something and we forget about something quite important.
With that, I I would like just to encourage our audience to start typing their questions in the Q&A box. It has been a fantastic presentation or lecture, if I may. Just the very last question before we enter into our more juicy discussion, Antonio. What's your opinion about the current draft AI Act that it's crafted by the European Commission, which is based in trustworthy AI?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. First of all, in the draft, there are a number of values and ideas and ethical notions that I mentioned at the beginning. From the point of view of the language of the draft, and this is something that, for instance, my colleague Valerio De Stefano rather early highlighted, this draft is not different from a lot of the ethical guidelines that I've seen. I don't see any new perspective in this. I might also say that this draft, of course, as you know, does not happen in a vacuum. This directive is part of a wave of new directives, like that are germane, that come together, and that mean something because they are applied together. We start with the GDPR, and then we have the Data Market Act, and then the Data Service Act, and then we have the new directive on platform labor, and then finally we also have this one about AI. They are not independent. They have to be taken into account together, because if they will have an effect, they will have an effect because they are used together. And what I have in mind in particular, just to be more precise and less abstract, is that when we look at AI, we can never forget about platform labor, because the vast majority of the persons who I interview and that train AI or impersonate AI or verify AI are hired on platforms. And this is something that should probably make us think.
Thank you, Antonio. I'm taking a question from Cedric Williams from Wales, where he asked, can the micro workers you refer to be organized into unions?
Oh, splendid question. And actually a lot of work to do. Let's be clear. What's happening today in platform labor organization, meaning organizing platform workers, mainly has to do with very visible categories of platform workers. For instance, you see unions that have been popping up in the last 5 years of couriers or of drivers. These are, I wouldn't say easy to organize, because they face really remarkable challenges in their lives. But at least they are visible. They are in the same spot. They are in the same city, mostly, while micro workers are scattered all around the world. So what has been happening in the last 5 to 7 years, basically, is that they have been successful not in unionizing in the sense of creating a union. The only time they tried was on Amazon Mechanical Turk, and they created a guild, not exactly a union. There's a, it dates back to 2013, 15. It didn't actually work. But they were successful in a few cases in creating class actions and litigating and basically, negotiating the algorithm in the court. So in the court of law. And for instance, there is a remarkable example in 2020 here in France of a platform that supported 700,000 micro workers, which is clearly an exaggeration. And this platform was sentenced to hire all the micro workers. Now they have a problem. Or for instance, more recently, a few months ago, in Brazil, in the state of Sao Paulo, after an intervention of the very Ministry of Labor of Brazil, one other company that owned another platform of migrant workers was sentenced to hire, I think, 15,000 or something along those lines. So again, probably for migrant workers, given the fact that they are scattered all around the world, the unionization is more difficult, but some other tools are available.
Right, and I just remind our audience that my colleagues here at ETUI are also trying to map this phenomena in Europe, and we have some studies that you can find them in the chat. I would like to take the question from Christopher Attar, and he asked, would a requirement or a policy that demands transparency help expose this hidden layer of AI that you just shown to us?
Well, the requirements are, they might end up being rather mundane. You know, if we just applied, you know, corporate environmental responsibility and corporate social responsibility standards, and if we were able to enforce those standards all along the supply chain, and from this point of view, again, there is some interesting and exciting new pieces of legislation coming out of Europe on supply chains and the responsibility of multinational companies. Well, if we were able to apply these, well, it would be a big step in the right direction. Another thing that has been done, has been tried in the past, was coming up with, let's say, bottom-up or grassroots directives, like in 2016-17, the IG Metall, as you know, big German union, tried to federate a few groups and collectives of crowd workers and platform workers, and they came up with a document called the Frankfurt Papers. The Frankfurt Papers was one way of saying, of asking the questions like, okay, if we have, I don't know, a company that produces in AI, and this company is in Germany, but they hire people in Bangladesh, which court of law is actually the one relevant if there is a litigation? For instance, if we have to apply minimum wage, which country's minimum wage? By the way, some countries do not have a minimum wage enforced or even established. They never actually came up with a minimum wage. It would be extremely interesting, for instance, if people working from Madagascar, where the average wage is around 80 euros, should be paid using the French minimum wage, which is, as of now, I think 1,500 euros, which, you know, it would be a big jump ahead.
Yeah, I can imagine. And talking about people and wages, from wages to ages, Deborah Allen Rogers asked you if you have included youth in your research and teaching. By youth, she specifies the age range between 13 and 18 years old.
It is, I am guilty of not including youth, because I basically specialize in adult education. I am a university professor, and basically my students are on the older side, actually. I actually basically teach to postgraduates. So the persons I usually work with or teach to are 20 years old or more. Which of course means, I mean, the sense of the question is it could be, it should be done to, you know, familiarize younger persons with this kind of topics, as we have done in the past with some success, to the topic of privacy and data governance. And of course, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of challenges that educators are facing every day in teaching privacy. But as of now, I'm pretty sure that the awareness, at least in the countries I live in, an awareness of the fact that data are stored and recorded in a certain way, and that algorithms do things with your data is rather spread even among people 13 to 18 and even younger. And they do come up with some, let's say, informal strategies to, circumvent this. Now, of course, if we started also teaching this younger persons that when they think in terms of AI, sometimes there is no AI, it's just somebody else in India or in Madagascar or in Venezuela, looking at their pictures and applying by hand the dog face filter on Instagram, whatever. Probably the perception would change, and it would be important to do this.
Yeah, more often there is no AI, so that's the point of this talk. And there is a question by Birte Dedden from Germany, from Uni Europa. She asks, it's related a little bit on the previous last question. Do you think that we could use provisions on due diligence to address the issues related to the AI supply chain?
Yes, definitely, and this is the way to go. And it has been already discussed by several law experts, legal experts. I am not in the field. Again, I do not pretend to be. I'm only insisting on the fact that due diligence is a powerful tool. And as in the past, we have been using it, again, with some success in other sectors. It should be done also in the technology sector. And the other important part, let me just add this. This might seem like a very, let's say, entering in the minutiae of the argument. Sometimes it is difficult to apply and to comply with due diligence, even for companies, because they themselves ignore who is doing what with the data and with the data work. Let me give you an example. It is not usually the HR of a company, at least in our experience, that hire or recruit people, in the global south. These are usually bought like services by people who are, for instance, the COO, the Chief Operating Officer. It does not have to do with the HR. So if we want to implement due diligence, even in the human research management, we should probably start by taking this kind of micro work and moving it from operation to HR, which is an important step that has to be done internally. Inside the companies first, and then we can apply due diligence all you want.
All right, thank you. That's very useful. I think that many ideas will come out from this. And just staying in the company area dimension, we have a question from the INRS from France, Benjamin Paty, who asked the main issues that we will have to deal in occupational health and safety, of course, will be perhaps less about the confidence of the workers in using the algorithm or, yes, being part of the loop of the algorithm than about the conditions of the workers who are behind the platforms. What's your opinion about that?
That they go together, actually. Let's be frank. I think that if we want to make, a moonshot, if we want to think about big ideas and big projects, and we want to change the situation and actually put in place a really ethical AI, we have to start creating alliances, political alliances, between workers, users, and invisible workers. Call them micro workers, call them crowd workers, whatever you want to call it. Because there is something that has to be said about the condition of somebody who is using, for instance, an algorithm or an AI in a factory in Europe, and this person is on, let's say, in the same boat with the micro worker in Madagascar or in Venezuela, but also me as the final user of the result of all these. I am in the same boat too. Whenever I use a platform, a social platform, such as, again, Facebook or TikTok or whatever, I am producing data just like any other micro worker. I am a micro worker myself. except that they are paid 0.0001 cent per click, and I'm paid 0.0000 forever. I'm paid 0, and they are paid almost 0. But our, let's say, our destiny is the same, and our ethical concerns are the same, and the dignity that we require is the same on the user side and on the worker side.
Well, this is fantastic. I should print this out because it's amazing. I would like to link this little bit with a question from Camila from SASC. And she says something about hearing more about justice and fairness of AI related to examples, for example, about racism that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. The question is, how does AI increase injustice and unfairness of people?
Yeah. Okay. I have to refer you to the work of my colleague and good friend Milagros Micelli. Milagros Micelli is an Argentinian-German researcher based in Berlin, and she's been working a lot with us, especially on changing our perception of what is bias, algorithmic bias. Mm. So far, what we have heard is that sometimes these algorithms, they are wrong, but we can correct them. We can, and of course, if they are wrong, the fault is usually of the data, because they were trained with racist data, for instance, or data that were produced by racists. What Milagros Micelli has been demonstrating all throughout her career is that workers and people who produce data are not responsible, because usually what they do is that they are forced to put in place some tags and labels that discriminate people. Let me give you an example. People in Argentina or Bulgaria, this is documented, and she published several articles about this, who micro-work for northern countries, corporations who produce AI, and these corporations tell them, for instance, people in Argentina, differentiate between people who are black and white. Okay, so put a tag, black and white, on a person. Now, the first thing that one has to say is that if you come from South America, black and white does not always compute in the same way in each country. Some countries, like Colombia or Brazil, are predicated on the fact that people are multiracial, and nobody's always, like in the US, discriminated only based on black and white. So these workers and migrant workers are usually trying to, juggle with these strange and contradictory injunctions that come from platforms, from startups, from companies that want them to start discriminating between faces, between profiles on social media, between bank accounts. The applications are multiple, and the risk for racism and discrimination are multiple too. But the important point is that when we talk about bias and the algorithms that are biased, this is not from a statistical point of view. This is from the point of view of good old power and oppression and discrimination, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. If you mind, we would like to finalize. If there is no other question, dear audience, please type it on the chat. There is a question going back to the sustainability of AI, of course, by Andreas Andreu, and where he says that the Platform on Sustainable Finance issued a report a few days ago on minimum safeguards, and there is no reference to AI as far as he understands. Do you know this report?
I don't, and I'm extremely curious. Andreas, please find my email on Google or any other evil algorithm, and please drop me a line. I would be delighted to know more about this. We lost you, unfortunately, Aida.
Yes, welcome back. This has been a fascinating exchange, and the audience has liked your your intervention a lot. Here you have the report by the European Commission, by the way. Thank you very much, Andreas. All right. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. I think it's time, sadly, to let you go and to finalize this. This has been a beautiful exchange. Would you like to conclude with something? Do you have anything? No, it's okay.
Just that I want to say that a couple of conferences coming up, and if you want to join us, we will be delighted. The first one is in Paris, in France, at the Ministry of Economy and Finance. The conference is called Artificial Intelligence and Globalization. It is free. You can register and you can look for it. It's Artificial Intelligence and Globalization in Bercy on October the 27th. And then the second event, if you are in Greece, from the 3rd to the 5th of November, we have a big conference coming up. It's called INDL. INDL is the International Network on Digital Labor. And this is our 5th conference. And please join us again if you are in Athens. It is free and anybody can join. And we especially encourage union members and leaders to join us.
This has been fantastic. I will go. And well, I think it's time to close our AI talk. And we hope that you found today's episode interesting as much as I did. Antonio, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Aida.
And thank you, the audience, for tuning into our AI talks at ETUI. See you next time. Take care. Goodbye. I'm on my own.